Let's get into audience questions. There's some really good topics this week. First one is from Gila. Gila says, hey, David, how do you explain the horribly low approval rating for Congress and the very high reelection rate for Congress? Yeah, that's a good question. You would think that if if congressional approval is so low, that you would see a correspondingly low reelection rate for members of Congress, but that's not actually the case. So I think there's two different phenomena at play here. Number one is this idea that while big picture people say Congress is a disaster, I don't approve of the job they're doing, a lot of people simultaneously believe that their elected officials, their member of Congress, is not part of the problem or is not that bad, right? So you will very often see, in other words, to get an 11% congressional approval, you would imagine that that would be sort of the average or mean of all congressional approvals, and that thus there would be people that are well below 11% that would get us to that 11%. But what it turns out is that even though as an institution people don't approve of Congress, they tend to approve of their own elected officials to a much higher degree because they apparently believe that it's all of the other elected officials that are the problem. So that's number one, and that's sort of a basic behavioral economics phenomena that has been discussed a lot. That's number one. Number two is that the power of incumbency allows you to raise money, and that when you have more money, you're way more likely to win. So even if your approval rating isn't that high, because you're an elected official, you're going to get contributions not only from individuals, but also from lobbying groups, corporations, et cetera. And we know that when you have more money, you're more likely to win. So that's why. And it's a very reasonable question. It's a similar question to, wait a second, if our elected officials represent us, why is it that even though most people want net neutrality, they could only get just around half of all senators to support it because most of their constituents support net neutrality? Why wouldn't there be more senators supporting it? It's a similar sort of thing where the numbers don't match up with each other. And you would think if people think Congress is so horrible, there should be more incumbents losing, but it's just not the way the system is built. In fact, I would argue the system by design is one in order to consolidate and maintain power, where even with low approval as a legislative body, individual members of Congress still have a very good shot at being reelected. They want that in order to maintain their power in the status quo.
Yeah, and we also just live in a very diverse country, too. I mean, if you ask me if I approve of my liberal congressman or senator from, Massachusetts, from Boston or Cambridge or wherever, I would probably say yes.
Okay.
But then if you ask me if I approve of some senator or congressman from Utah, I would say no, and the people living there would say the exact opposite.
Well, yeah,
right?
and I think that's part of the entire. Yeah, I don't agree with what the body is doing,
Sure.
but my specific elected official just isn't a part of the problem. It's everybody else that's a part of the problem.
That's why, like, if we were in Europe, we would be consisted of maybe like 10 countries, right? We're just that diverse.
Yes, I've said this before. When I have traveled to northern Florida, not Miami Beach, but northern Florida, or I was recently in rural Miami, or when I've been to California or other parts of the country, really all we have in common is that we've decided the name of the country is the United States of America, and ostensibly we have the same president at all times. Not ostensibly, we have the same president, although not everybody ever recognizes that president as their president in the same way. But really, these very well could be different countries. And the cultural differences between regions of the United States are certainly bigger, or at least as big as the cultural differences that exist between some of the smaller European countries, for sure.
But I do think there are solutions here, and you laid out some of them. And it has a lot to do with campaign finance reform and gerrymandering, too, solving that.